So the scripture reading for today is taken from Mark chapter 5, verses 25 to 34. A woman in the crowd had suffered for 12 years with constant bleeding. She had suffered a great deal from many doctors over the years and had spent everything she had to pay them, but she'd got no better. In fact, she got worse. She'd heard about Jesus, so she came up behind him through the crowd and touched his robe, for she thought to herself, if I can just touch his robe, I will be healed. Immediately the bleeding stopped, and she could feel in her body that she had been healed of a terrible condition. Jesus realized at once that healing power had gone out from him, so he turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my robe?" His disciples said to him, "Look at this crowd pressing around you. How can you ask who touched me?" But he kept on looking around to see who had done it. The frightened woman, trembling at the realization of what had happened to her, came and fell to her knees in front of him and told him what she had done. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Your suffering is over."
Jesus at the Gay Bar by J. Hum. He's here in the midst of it, right at the centre of the dance floor, robes hitched up to his knees to make it easy to spin. At some point in the evening, a boy will touch the hem of his robe and beg to be healed. Beg to be anything other than this. And he will reach his arm out, sweat damp, weary from dance. He'll cup this boy's face in his hand and say, "My beautiful child, there is nothing in this heart of yours that ever needs to be healed."
Thanks, Gary. That's for reading. I love this. You can go to the next picture, Joel. I was looking really hard for a picture of Jesus on the dance floor. And I didn't really want white Jesus on the dance floor, but all I could find was white Jesus dancing. That's my attempt at putting a picture together. So I think we need some art. We need some art that has Jesus dancing. If you can imagine, like in the poem, his clothes hitched up, sweaty arms, joy on his face, flushed cheeks. Imagine the beauty of that. Imagine it. But for many of us, stories like we've just read in the Gospels have a lot of baggage because of the ways that the stories have been told to us in the past. We have all sorts of stories about Jesus that have maybe been framed to us as Jesus going in from his light place into the dark place, healing the people that are broken, healing the people that need to be pulled out of the darkness into the light. And I want to challenge that today. If you can go to the next slide, Joel. David Derbyshire sent me this cartoon. If you're online and you can't quite see it, there's a guy with lots of bags and a guy next to him asking, "So God, why do you come with so much baggage?" And God says, "This is your shit, not mine." Now equally, you could also say, "This is the church's shit, not mine." And I want to think about that today. And I love how this poem, it's tempting to think of the poem as subverting the story. We were talking about this the other night in our leadership group. But actually, it is the story. It's the story that Jesus tells of someone that is loved unconditionally. I don't think it's subverted. I don't think it's a challenge to the story. I think it's a fulfilling of it. There's a quote here from, well, actually, let me just back up. The healing that's involved in the original story, we hear about pain that this woman has been experiencing over many, many years, pain in her body that she's sought help for. But there's another pain that goes with that pain. There's the pain of rejection that comes with being seen as unclean, that's come from being rejected from the communities that she's part of because 12 years of bleeding has kept her out of an awful lot. Now, when we're talking about being unclean, so perhaps some of us can identify with being made to feel that way. I really like this blog post that was written by Jay Holm, who wrote the poem that we shared earlier. And I'll just read his words in responding to this. Jesus states, "There's nothing in this heart of yours that ever needs to be healed. Or is that not quite true? You see, there is healing in this poem. It's just not the healing you'd expect." In the poem, just as in Mark 5 and throughout the Gospels, Jesus does the unexpected. The boy's queerness is not healed because, as stated, it does not need to be healed. And it is through not healing their queerness that the boy, and hopefully the reader, is healed of whatever it was that made them reach out to Jesus in the first place and beg not to be queer. One thing that I really love about Jesus, when you look back to the stories that have often been misframed for us as being Jesus somehow, putting himself in these places where he doesn't quite fit in. Jesus was born into a place that wasn't quite what you'd expect a king, the ruler of the universe, to be born into. There's a, if you can go to the next one, there's a liberation theologian, a Mexican-American one, liberation theologian, who has something that's called the Galilean principle. And that is, what humans reject, God chooses as his very own. Go to the next one. There's a little summary again of what that means. The fact that Jesus is born in a stable in Bethlehem and takes up his residence and ministry in Galilee is more than a geographical note recorded by the evangelists. Rather, it's the beginning of the good news, especially for those who are poor and excluded in any way. Jesus' entry into the world challenges the way the world normally thinks about power, authority, and greatness. From this social location, he undermines all the world's categories which deprecate and dehumanize, classify, or segregate human beings based on social labels such as superior or inferior, rich or poor, worthy or unworthy. Proximity matters. Where we situate ourselves matters, and that is part of the gospel. Jesus didn't deign to enter into the world of people. He was born into that world. He was one of them. Jesus always found his home amongst the people that made religious leaders uncomfortable. He always made people in power that held the power uncomfortable. He was found eating with people that you shouldn't eat with, touching people you shouldn't touch, going into their homes, making friends with them, and even making them his inner circle. And I tend to think that Jesus not only placed himself in these environments for the benefit of those who are excluded, but as a way to challenge, an invitation to those with power to lay it down and live in a different way, to learn from people who are pushed to the margins. That's where Jesus always was. Because of many of us, because of who we are, this association with this part of Jesus has been a gift to us. It's our bedrock as IGB. Maybe you've been excluded because you're trans, because you're gay, because of disability, because of race, social class, mental health, a personality that people didn't quite think fit. Whatever it is, your beliefs, Jesus stands with you. Jesus always stands with you, and we have that as a gift. So this leads me to the news, the story, and I thought it was really important to place it in this context. So I'm gonna start from the beginning. Oh, I jumped ahead a little bit. It's okay. A couple of months ago, at the beginning of the summer, I was invited to a meeting, and it was with local council, it was with the NHS, it was with charities around Brum. I still don't really know how I got invited to the meeting, but it was all about how we contribute to the flourishing of the LGBT community in the city. And I was just listening, and you know, these things, you don't know if they're going to be useful. You just kind of show up and see what happens. And I noticed that I was the only person that was a faith leader that was on the Zoom. And one of the key people from Pride was there, and she said, "Oh, I want to say I'm really glad that we have a faith leader here, because it's really important to center spirituality in the village." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And then a few minutes later, someone else who is involved in that area and development in that area was like, "I'm an ally, and I want to see the gay village shine from space with rainbows. I want everyone around us to know that if they enter into this community, they are safe, they are loved, they are welcome. They don't have to fear." And I was like, like, yes, moved by that. And to be honest, like I've been pondering and praying with some of our leaders about like the future of IGB, and you know, this space has been lovely. It's been almost like a little oasis space, but it's quite far from things, isn't it? And I think we've learned that as time has gone on. It's far, but also there's a perception of it being far. And to be honest, we're in a central place where we're meeting, but we're not in a community here. And I started to wonder and pray and chat with other people about what would it look like for us as a church that gathers people from all over the Midlands to be in a place, in a locality, in a community. What if the gay village could be our locality? And I didn't really know how that was going to happen. And so, you know, a few of us had started praying, lots of us were chatting. Anybody that I mentioned the idea to was like, "That would be great, wouldn't it?" Yeah. So I made a bunch of appointments, chatted with a bunch of people, and anybody that I mentioned, we'd really love to be situated in the gay village. You know, that could be our spot. That we could provide a service by just being a church that is safe for anyone to come to. And we could also just be there to listen to people and respond to the needs of the community. And talking to the LGBT center and different places, everyone's like, "Oh, that's great, it's a great idea." And I wasn't sure, we just kind of, I said to a few people, had this image of like us collectively holding our hands open and like the pieces falling really, really slowly, really like big chunks of glitter. And as they fall, the right things were going to land in our hands, and the wrong things were going to fall through our fingers, and that we just needed to trust and wait. So that's been my prevailing image all summer. And so we started to think, well, what would it look to take steps toward experimenting around this? So I went and met with folks at the Loft just to see if we could have some conversations in their space. And they were like, "You can meet here. You can meet here every week." So we can meet there every week. And so, like, this is really new news, and thankfully we are a community that doesn't have a lot of red tape, which is a lovely thing. So, you know, we want to be communal and collaborative about what we're doing. We want to get people's input and our insight about things, but we can make stuff like this happen quickly. And so, next week, we're going to have our first meeting at the Loft Lounge. And our first gathering there will be downstairs in the restaurant. We're going to have some simple worship together, but we're also going to just take some space to dream and pray and to consider what it could look like for us to be in that space, in that community, and take people's ideas on board. So the kind of rough way that I think it will look over the next number of months is we're going to plan to have something that looks like a bit like this, like a worship gathering on the first Sunday of each month. And we'll continue to meet every week at the Loft, but in a simpler way on the other weeks of the month. And we'll see what happens from there. We're also, some of us are exploring this idea of what it could look like to have some chaplaincy in the gay village. And there's been some real positive response to that from Pride and from others. And so, yeah, we're like, in a lot of ways, we're at the start of this journey. It's all kind of this beginning point. It's happened quite quickly. But for me, like, this isn't about us being a gay church. I'm actually not gay. I don't mind if you thought I was. I'm not gay. I'm someone who really just does not want to worship in a place where anyone's excluded. And I really, really have been blessed by queer spirituality and being around gay Christians and LGBT Christians who have poured into my life. And I want that, and I want other people to want that. And so what we're saying is, this is a place to situate ourselves. This is our place to serve. This is our place to explore and listen to the Spirit and see what the Spirit is going to do and how the Spirit's going to work through us in this season. And I think it's just that time of like not really knowing exactly what that's going to look like, and being part of forming that together. So one of my friends, Sally, uses the term wet cement quite a lot when she talks about planning. That's kind of what this is. This is the wet cement stage, where we're going to try some stuff. We always say that we're a learning community. We're always saying that if something doesn't work, we try something else. And that would be true in this context here. So that's the story. And so this is our last week in Edgbaston, if you can believe it. Anyway, I want to read one more. So there's the gay village, the Loft is just down the corner from there. One of the things I just felt like I needed to quote my friend Liz Edmond, who's a bit of a hero, who writes about her book's called Queer Virtue, what LGBTQ people know about life and love and how it can revitalize Christianity. And she says, if my queer identity informs my understanding of my Christian faith, might the lessons of queer identity help other Christians better understand their faith too? That's my prayer. How amazing to be a church for all in a space where Jesus will go to church. So that's the dream. And I just love just to think again, that healthy challenge and just being with Jesus in that space with his skirts hiked up and the sweat dripping down his brow and the smile on his face. And that we can be like that. We can be like that in that community, in that space. So I'm going to hand over to Mark now. He's going to play us a song. It's very appropriate. And thanks for listening. There'll be plenty of time for questions next week.